Nubcake News! Stop that. Welcome to this week's edition of Nubcake News. Coming up later in the programme, a special report on the Black Temple's first raid boss. A huge brick wall with evil-looking eyes that players must bash their heads against for hours on end, only to find that all they've been left with is a very sore head. But first, all over the world, even in countries without the internet, there has been growing concern as to the state of play in the Burning Crusade, Blizzard's leading card game. Nerfs, buffs, and half a pound of halfpenny rice have been occurring all over the Outlands as players struggle to keep up with a huge number of changes. One is quoted as saying, OMG WFPP cool. Another, somewhat more sensible player is then quoted as saying, all of these buffs and nerfs are hardly compensated by the half a pound of halfpenny rice. I mean, what exactly are we supposed to do with this? Beat angry Murlocs to death with it? Okay, well, I suppose that works, but it's still lousy. Blizzard's response was drastic action, calling Weeble and Bob to the rescue. The hotline is ring. Answer it then, Bob. Your player is slightly confused by the state of affairs in the game. Here in the sky. Sadly, this had little effect on the game, despite being rather amusing to watch, so we called a representative at Blizzard. Go away! We called another representative at Blizzard. What's World of Warcraft? Finally, we called someone who actually made sense. Fangtooth.
Mr. Fangtooth, may I have a moment of your time?
Booga, 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 booga.
How does Blizzard intend to solve the confusion between players as to the constant buffing and nerfing of encounters in the Burning Crusade?
Sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows everywhere and... Wait a moment, when did we hire a female reporter?
After the whole Nihilin doesn't recruit girls and small furry mammals debacle, we had to write one in. Equal opportunities and all.
And that's supposed to explain the Murloc sports correspondent, I presume?
Pretty much.
Okay, since we were able to discern very little from Fangtooth's lunacy, we went to Blizzard HQ directly and knocked on the door. At which point we were told to answer me these questions 3. The questions were exceptionally easy and we were let inside. We had the pleasure of speaking to Zerek, who informed us of a maniacal master plan to fix everything. Hello there, gentlemen, and what is that? It's a female, sir. Oh, yes, right, the new Alliance race. Not used to seeing them around these parts. We're all Horde, you know. Yes, quite. Would you mind explaining the use of the Master Plan? Ah, yes, we looked at the success of other RPGs as related to our endgame encounters and came up with the following plan. Random encounters!
Random encounters?
Indeed, every time the players take a step in the Outland, they have a random proc chance of being transported to a battlefield, upon which they will encounter randomness.
What do you exactly mean by randomness?
Turn-based combat, determined entirely using dice. Dice? Absolutely. Each player will be provided with a bag of D20, which they will use as projectiles.
Projectiles? Surely the idea is to roll the dice and have that determine the encounter.
We found our players were far more inclined to simply throw things than follow any kind of rule structure. See, there's some of our testers right now. Is this all you're going to be able to do to solve the disparities that have now occurred in the Outlands? Absolutely not. McTheridan is very upset by the recent nerfs.
I am very upset.
See? Very upset. So in the interest of fairness and balance, well, since we nerfed the endgame encounters, we shall also be nerfing the players by lowering the level cap back to 60. Since so many players complained at the increase of the level cap in the first place, we feel this would be an adequate solution to everyone's problems.
And what exactly are the in-gamers supposed to do when that happens?
What the hell is endgame? An adequate solution for all, truly a new and golden age of prosperity, wherein we will grow many more fields worth of half a pound of halfpenny rice. This has been Nubcake News. Good night. Yes, indeed, folks, you're tuning in to Blue Please here on WoW Radio with myself, Total Biscuit. Welcome to the show. Well, those who've just tuned in, and many, many have, that was the sounds of Nubcake News and its very, very silly nature. And, of course, Dragon Force with Black Fire. Right, Nihilum interview will be coming up after this show. Yes, it will. In approximately 1 hour's time, so stay tuned for that. Many listeners, left side, even side. So let's get on with it. Topics for this week. The second topic that I have for this week is coming up very, very shortly. But first, I must make a shameless request. Our guild requires a prot tank. Yes, indeed. Blue Please, the small form epic raiding guild on Mazrigo EU, requires a prot tank because our last one was rubbish. We went into Karazhan, he couldn't even work out where to tank Midnight. It was really sad. I mean, we've been gearing up just to go into Karazhan, make sure that everything's just set up just right. We've got the proper players, we've done the heroics, we've got the gear. You know, our feral tank's got gear that he's not going to get better by Grawl, for God's sake. But no! We have a failure of an off-tank, so we G-kicked it, obviously. So yeah, we need another prot tank. We will be willing to pay for transfers. Also, if there's any Holy Paladins out there that would be interested in joining a very nice, very, very nice raiding guild, then just email me at themurloc@gmail.com with the subject Blue Please Guild. I will be paying for your transfer. Oh yes. Right, okay, let's get on with this. Second topic for the week, attunement, keying, all that good stuff. If you notice, there's been a very, very nice thing posted on, I believe, worldofwarcraft.com recently, which is one of these really interactive kind of charts which shows you what you need to do for keying up. At least it was here, and has now disappeared. Typical. Absolutely typical. Let's see if I can actually find it before I look like a complete jackass for making things up which don't actually exist. Come on, let me find it. Oh, God, I can't find it at all. All I know is it is there. Trust me. It is there. Now, what it does actually show, specifically, which is really rather nifty, is what you need to get into every single current raid dungeon within the Outlands. Now, that's very, very handy, because a lot of these keychains are really quite long. That's acceptable, because, well, keying. Is it a good idea? That's the really big question. Do people really want this keying up process? Is it a good idea, and why is it there in the first place? Interesting idea. Now, firstly, I'll take the more cynical point of view. And yes, there is such thing as a more cynical point of view. The more cynical point of view is this. Blizzard has put in attunement and keying specifically to keep people out of content that they haven't necessarily finished yet. Now, why would I say that? I'll give a specific example. Mount Hayal, to our knowledge, is a 5-man encounter. This is to our knowledge. I may be completely wrong by this because we haven't been told. Now, it requires two things. It requires the Vials of Eternity, which can be acquired from Lady Vash and Kael'thas Sunstrider. Two of the hardest bosses, if not the hardest bosses at this point in time, in the Outland. Now, either a 5-man is going to be so excruciatingly hard and awesome that it gives you gear better than those two, or it's been put in there to keep people out of content that they haven't finished yet. Foreseeable. There's no two ways about it. It could happen. It most certainly could happen. So, is that the case? Well, let's look at it from a different angle. Why is attunement a good idea? The best way to actually compare is to look at the old legacy content. Now, legacy content was introduced in a way as to pretty much be fed piecemeal to the people who were playing the game. When you first went in, you didn't have a lot of options, and then they added one after one after one after one, and they added one dungeon at a time. Now, when you enter the Outlands, all of this raiding stuff has been foreseen and put in the game beforehand. Now, what exactly are you going to do about that? Because that's changed things around. It used to be 1, 2, 3, 4. You went through those 4 major dungeons: Molten Core, Blackwing Lair, Anchorage 40, Naxxramas. Now, it's a case of, well, you can go here, or here, or here. Whereas there was one Onyxia-style encounter. Wow, someone has sent a text message to my phone. Let's see what it says. Just for an advisor. Terpster says, read my PMs. Terpster, stop interrupting me. Anyway. So, yeah. The attunement, is it in there for any specific purpose? Yes. Because you now do not have this whole 1, 2, 3, 4 and one at the side called Onyxia. you've actually got several encounters that are supposedly Onyxia level, specifically Gruul's Lair and Magtheridon Lair. Now, go and have a look on woweurope.com. We've posted this in the main channel. It's wow-europe.com/en/info/basics/BC attunement. And you will see, you've got your standard, your heroic, and then you've got Magtheridon's Lair, Karazhan, and Gruul's Lair, which are under the title of Raid 1. And then under Raid 2, you have Tempest Keep and Serpent Shrine Cavern. And interestingly enough, under Raid 3, which apparently actually Mount Hyal is a 25-man raid. Interesting to see, to say the least. You've got Hyal. Hyal right now is sitting at the top of the table, and the attunement is massive. If you hold it over, you've got to grab the Vials of Eternity, which means you have to beat Tempest Keep and Serpent Shrine. To beat Tempest Keep, you first have to beat Magtheridon's Lair to complete the Tempest Key. To beat Serpent Shrine Cavern, you have to complete Karazhan, specifically a Night Bane based quest. If you lock it down and have a look at it, you need to do quest Night Bane, and you need to go through all of this stuff, beat Gruul's Lair to get in there. Huge amount of attunement to get in there, whereas previously, you're looking at very simple attunement quests that are just there to say, well, yeah, no, so at least everyone can't wander in. Why? Because there's more. It's not so linear anymore. Now, you would think that it would be. Standard, heroic, Karazhan. You'd have thought that would be the way that it went. And after Karazhan, Magtheridon's Lair, Gruul's Lair. However, the problem is that now that they've nerfed Gruul and Magtheridon to the level where they can be taken down in a kind of Onyxia style, players who haven't even beaten Karazhan are taking Gruul and Magtheridon down. Now that's a very interesting thing to see. Now Gruul and Magtheridon do not actually require any attunement. Yep. Which is different to the way Onyxia was. Onyxia required an extensive attunement chain, but then again, look at the reason behind that. Why did it have such an extensive attunement? Because it was the only thing there at the time. They didn't want everyone to be caning the encounter so quickly, they needed time. In this case, Gruul and Magtheridon's Lair are already finished. They were already in the game to begin with. Now, Tempest Keep and Serpent Shrine, while they are finished, they are untuned. We know this. Because they're so obscenely hard, and guilds like D&T and Nihilum are actually reporting that encounters are pretty much now and impossible. Mogrim Tidewalker would be a good example. As you'll find out in the interview later when they explain the Mogrim Tidewalker scenario, Nihilum ran their heads up against Mogrim Tidewalker, and he spawns two kinds of ads. Or at least he did. He spawned Murlocs and Water Elementals. Now the Water Elementals had Spell Reflect, therefore they couldn't be AoE'd down, which made them impossible to kill, pretty much, because you need to AoE that number of ads. They couldn't deal with it. And they then removed that ad completely. Now that is a huge change. It's not just an HP or spreadsheet change, it is a huge change to the encounter. The fundamentals of the encounter have been changed. It's not a bug fix, it's simply an untuned encounter. Not so good, has to be said, not so good at all. So, why are there so many of these attunements? Is it because they haven't finished everything yet? I mean, that's the one cynical way of looking at it. That is one very cynical way of looking at it, but I imagine there is an element of truth to it. I don't think that's the entire reason for it. I actually like the system of attunement, because you can choose your path and work your way up to this Raid 2, as they're calling it, level dungeons. And it's just something you can do. You know, you can go walk into Magtheridon's Lair, walk into Gruul's Lair, there's all this stuff that you can access from day one, and it just makes sure that you've got as a guild to dedicate to some particular things. And they have kind of kept a degree of linearity. Kind of. Not by much, admittedly, but there is some. Like, the Karazhan keychain involves you going through some relatively difficult instances. Black Morass, Steam Vaults, Shadow Labyrinth, Arcatraz. Arcatraz requires you to key up in itself. So it's a chain, like the Onyxia chain. However, in this instance, unlike Onyxia, the smaller raid boss dungeons which can be compared to Onyxia do not require attunement, which is a very interesting way of looking at things. And you've got your Naxxramas kind of level instances. They're up there, right at the top. Tempest Keep, Serpent Shrine. Tempest Keep, Serpent Shrine, right at the top. And then, of course, you've got to go to Hyal. So, either Hyal is going to be so obscenely difficult that it requires this, or they just ain't finished it yet. We really don't know. But to be honest, I do like the system. You know, I think that keying up for these kind of things is good. It gives you a sense of accomplishment and a sense of direction within your guild. Your guild has to dedicate to its particular path. It can't just ponce in somewhere and go and kill some mobs. It just doesn't work that way. You can't just go in there, kill a boss. It does bring some of the old legacy content back and integrates what was a reasonably decent system. It stops people from jumping in the deep end and getting incredibly frustrated and having a lack of direction. Beforehand, the reason for that was the lack of content. They were feeding it to us piecemeal. Now, it's because the content's already there, but some of it is way too hard for you. Way too hard. As in, you cannot do it. End of story, good game, you've got to do something beforehand. So yeah, I'm a fan. I will attest to being a relative fan of attunement. I would say that it's a very good thing. However, and there's always a however, just how far can it go? Where is Black Temple going to be on this list? I assume that you're not going to have to defeat Hayao. I would hope not. I would hope that they're not going back to a really serious idea of linearity, because right now there's quite a nice selection of things you can do. You could go to Tempest Keep, or you could go to Serpent Shrine. Of course, what Nihilum are telling us, and what D&T are telling us, and anyone else that's actually managed to get into Tempest Keep, is that Tempest Keep is a shed load harder than the first few bosses in Serpent Shrine. But then, they're also telling us that that's because it's untuned. Hydros, for instance, has already been nerfed and will probably be nerfed more in the future. Other bosses in Serpent Shrine have already been nerfed. Tempest Keep, that is not the case. The only boss killed so far in Tempest Keep is the Void Reaver. The first boss has not even been killed. There's a little bit more information coming up in the interview just after the show as regards to that. But it is interesting to see that the first boss of Tempest Keep was not killed. You can bypass. It's not so much a linear thing. You can go to another boss. But the Void Reaver is the only one that's been killed so far in Tempest Keep. And that is a very interesting thing to see, because Serpent Shrine is getting caned. People are already on Vash. Now, you could argue that the reason for that is because they're hotfixing it as they go, and they're not hotfixing Tempest Keep because people aren't concentrating on it. So, why fix something that people aren't trying? There's a very good question. I suppose that must be the way that they're actually viewing it. You can't justify spending huge amounts of resources on something that no one's doing yet. And again, this might be the reason why they've blocked off the path to Mount Hayal. It's either that, or it's so incredibly difficult and they want to make something really, really difficult to get to. Of course, that's going to cause some problems, because people are they look at, say, Serpent Shrine, Tempest Keep, and they're not too fussed in the sense of lore hounds, Warcraft 3 hounds. They don't, fans do not really care about those two. Yeah, okay, killing Lady Vash and killing Kel'Thas Sunstrider, big deal, compared to the huge climactic battle at the end of Warcraft 3, which is, of course, Mount Hayal. And Mount Hayal requires you to take down Tempest Keep and Serpent Shrine. Now, that really locks the content off to the vast majority of people. I personally don't have a problem with that, because I like to work for my stuff. I like to work my way through and feel a real sense of accomplishment. I don't want to be jumping into that. The climactic event that's supposedly going to be really challenging and epic, and you're going to see all your favourite characters in it. But that's not to say that other people aren't going to get knocked off about it. They really, really are. I think when they realise they're not going to be able to get into Hayal for a very, very long time, and they really want to see what's going on in there, because Captains of Time was something that people got excited about, and they're going to get a little bit knocked off about that. I actually genuinely expect them to make it a little bit easier to get into Hayal. Which is, of course, going to involve serious nerfing if my theory is correct, that Hayal is so incredibly difficult that that's the reason that you need this. And if my other theory is correct, well, Hayal ain't even finished yet. So maybe they're just taking the time to finish it. It will be interesting to see whether or not they make the attunement easier. There really aren't very many, if any, if I can recall, examples of them doing that. I mean, let's look back at the attunement before. Attunement before, say, for Naxxramas was very, very linear. You'd already got the rep for it in the first place just by running older instances. And you can compare that to Heroics right now. To get into Shattered Halls Heroic, you need to run all these instances. To even get the Shattered Halls in general, to get the key for it, yeah, I know you can open it with just one person, but if you want the key, you need to be revered. No, you don't. I'm an idiot. You don't actually need that at all, do you? God, I believe I made such a dumb mistake. You don't need to be revered at all. To get in Heroic, you need to do that. And you have to do the previous instances in order to do it. you have to specifically do it in the order of, right, your basic instances up to Honoured, at which point they'll stop giving you rep, and then you do your level 70 instance to get you to Revered, which gets you your key, which gets you into your heroics. Now that compares to the old Nax attunement, in my honest opinion. You're doing older instances to get into newer. It's a very interesting topic. You can email in your opinions to themurloc@gmail.com on this one. Yes, indeed you can. Okay. I think it's time for a little bit of, perhaps, Ask the Murloc, since we've been missing that one for a very long time. You're listening to Blue Please here on WoW Radio. The Helam interview coming up in just a short number of minutes, 45 to be exact. My name's Total Biscuit. This is Blue Please. This is Ask the Murloc. Enjoy.